will my team be as productive at home as they are at the office? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so this is a really common question, actually, and I think this is one that's on the top of many employers' minds, whereby where they've got them in the office, they can see them, they know what they're doing, they know how many cigarette breaks they have, tea breaks, etc. And I think, as soon as you put somebody at home, then it's almost, well, what are they doing? What's going on? Are
Yeah.
they actually doing the work now? Or are they sitting there just having a cup of tea for hours and watching Netflix? That seems to be.
Yes, I know. I've definitely heard some employers call it hiding from home,
Yeah.
which is rather cynical.
Yeah, absolutely. And, but I think that goes a long way to saying, A, what the manager thinks of their team and employees, and also what the culture of the business is, because that's a massive one. That says to me that you don't trust your employees. And why? I mean, I really struggle with this, because I believe people go to work to do a good job, and they want to engage and they want to do well. And the employer obviously has hired them because of their skill set. And so to me, it seems like that's a really good partnership. So it's weird, just as soon as you go home, you're now hiding from home.
Yes. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I suppose it maybe raises a bigger question in terms of what's your recruitment policy like, and how good is it, and how perhaps another issue may be how much of a win-win is there between the expectations of the business, so what the business gets out of the relationship and what the employee gets out of it. I can imagine if there's an imbalance in that, then perhaps people would be tempted to take advantage, because there isn't that that good spirit between the employer and the employee in the first place.
Yeah, and I think sometimes what can happen is employers kind of start to micromanage, and I'm sure we've all kind of been through it, where you've had a manager that they get stressed and they're uncomfortable with a situation, and then they start to manage you even more, and then that makes you really uncomfortable and stressed.
Yes.
And it's kind of like, it's a roll-on effect. And I think if you've got that understanding and that respect, then that can go an awfully long way. But there's different ways perhaps to measure that productivity. So I would always say to employers, you've got to go and have those conversations, and you've got to figure out as well how the other person works and see what that expectation is. So are they planning to do a 9 till 5? Do you as an employer have core hours? Do they need extra time in the morning to drop the kids off at school, or what have they got going on in their day? And I think as soon as you can understand, okay, so I've now got an employee working from home who's going to be doing 3 hours solid, then they're going to go off for an hour's lunch break, but then they've got to go and pick the kids up early, or they've got to do this, then the expectation of the employer is already, okay, I understand what's going on. I've got visibility on my employee.
Yeah, collaborating over the whole arrangement, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that you can perhaps arrive at that point where you can say, well, we said that it's reasonable to get this much done by this much time, and how you organize getting there, you have the flexibility to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you could go down routes of doing like timesheets to measure productivity. And I think if you are going to go down something like that, it really is important to communicate the message around it, because if you do say, oh, let's do timesheets, people go, you're checking up on me. This is even more rigid than it was before.
Whereas there are some industries where it's like an accountancy or the legal field where that's absolutely standard anyway.
Yeah, that's absolutely normal practice. And I mean, like, even for me, when I'm working on my clients' work, I always do timing. So how long does it take me to write that contract, or to do that policy, or you know, to do that cultural development piece, so that my client has then got that visibility based upon actually what I'm doing and how productive I am. And, you know, sometimes I'll go off and I'll think, oh, you know, my head's not in this anymore. I need to go and have a break. And so I write down. And actually, it's really good just as an individual, just to be able to see how productive you are. Because I mean, I am not a fan of bums on seats. I hate it. I hate it where employers want people to just be sat there for 8 hours of a day doing their job, because we're not built that way. And I think, you know, if you go back, you know, back to the days when, you know, we were hunter-gatherers and that, we didn't go, right, we're now going to go out, you know, hunting for 8 hours straight. Oh, okay, 8 hours is finished, right, let's pack up and all go home. You know, it's kind of like more survival. And it might be, you know, you go late into the night, or, you know, you stop because you're absolutely knackered and you just run away from that saber-toothed tiger, or, you know, whatever it might be. And so I believe that we're still modeled like that to some degree. And we need to get up and move about, and we need to have breaks, and we need to rethink and regroup and come back, and that makes us more productive.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. They say that optimum intense working periods can sometimes be something like just 45 minutes and then a 5-minute break, or an hour and a half and then a 15-minute break. You can even set your time, you know, kind of your alarm to that, to make sure that you get the break, but also to put that adrenaline in that some people need, don't they? They need a timeline to work to.
Yeah, to have that urgency.
To actually do their best work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, if employers can start to be more flexible in terms of, rather than focusing on the amount of hours that people are doing and shifting that to deliverables and project outcomes, I think, you know, people, they'll feel more empowered, they feel trusted, they then end up feeling more motivated to actually want to deliver that and more. So
yeah, it's certainly my experience of coaching people that it's very rarely that they're complaining to me that they're taking too much time. They're neglecting their work. It's normally that they're very driven to go the extra mile, you know, all of those sorts of things, and you know, to do their best. And actually what they need is a bit of reining in to get that balance.
Yeah. And I think, you know, what happens as well is, you know, as a human race, we like to judge people, whether that's right or wrong. You know, I'm not going to get into that debate, but we like to judge ourselves against others. And I think sometimes, you know, you might have a manager who is very competent at their job and can do that task in half an hour. And you've delegated it. And the reason you've delegated it is because you can give it to somebody else to do, because you've got another task that you need to do, which is more urgent or more important or of a higher value, or, you know, lots of reasons. And sometimes I think the manager forgets that and thinks, well, I can do that job in half an hour. Why is it taking you 2?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And it's kind of like, you know, I think you've got to weigh that up a bit and say, well, is it okay for them to take 2 hours to do it at their level that they're at? Have you got any tips in trying to help managers break through that that thought process?
I think is what you said is actually a manager's role is to prioritize and to do the higher value things that they're paid to do. So if there's something that actually, and do the things that nobody else can do.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point.
So if they're doing things that actually their team members can do, that is not going to be effective, even though the team member has to go through a learning curve. If the manager has patience, then the team member will eventually get up to speed. And I think coming back to what you were saying earlier about this, you know, the bums on seats, the presenteeism.
Yes.
That measuring a person's contribution by how many hours they're working rather than how effectively they're working. Certainly in our culture, often I notice how much more often people say, "Are you busy?" And busy seems to almost be like a badge of honor, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And whereas if somebody said, "Well, no, actually I'm quite relaxed, I got to those tasks," somebody might assume that they haven't been given enough to do, instead of the fact that actually they're being very effective.
Yeah. And it always makes me laugh. So if I think back to in terms of, the days in the corporate world and things, and just speaking to clients and that, you get some people who are very good at saying, "Oh, I've just done this piece of work," and, "Oh, I'm really busy, and this has just happened, and this has come in." And then you get other people who don't say anything, but they just head down and they're just, getting through the bits. And I always used to think to myself, I wonder how many bits they've done today, because I've done 50 tasks I've completed today, and they've told me, and they've probably done 10.
Mm.
And I always used to think, I bet you the manager thinks they're more productive than I am.
Yeah, because they're giving it more publicity.
Yeah. And I think actually remote working, when you look at it from that perspective, is a brilliant opportunity for people that aren't able to communicate and say, "I've done that task, I've done this, look at me, I'm really good," to actually, if the manager then starts to look at the deliverables, they might really then start to see some differences and go, "Actually, who I thought was my high performer isn't quite as good as this other person that's a bit more introverted or quieter or does things differently."
Or just thinks it's a bit arrogant to start talking about what they've achieved.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
I think with remote working, there is a lot of advantages and disadvantages. And I think, for some people, it's going to be a real advantage. And especially for employers trying to figure out who is productive and how it works, might give people a real insight into what's actually happening.
Yeah. I think setting up methods of reporting that are uplifting for people, whether it's you decide it's through email or a catch up for 10 minutes just to find out where people are at, what their next priority is, what they need, what help they might need. Could be very motivating, and especially if it allows you, perhaps when your team is remote, to be a bit more even-handed in the attention that you give people, rather than your attention being drawn to the ones who are loud about it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, actually. And sometimes when you're in an office environment or in a workplace, you do tend to be drawn towards certain people over others. And I think when you do have it remote and you are always talking on a one-to-one basis, then actually you're then able to maybe take a step back and be a bit more objective. So I think that's a really good point in terms of, having those one-to-ones and being able to deal with people on a more human level, really.
Yeah. I think going back to the question about will they be as productive, I think that also a lot of that depends on their home environment as well, and their personality. So some people are more productive when everything's quiet, and other people are more productive when they're in the thick of things and they're interacting with people.
Yeah.
And then there's the family situation, the quality of the home working situation, the space, the table, the equipment that they have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, for employers to really just consider those things. And I don't think it's a case of, if you've got somebody that was in the office and they were such a high performer and then at home they're now not performing as well, that's not necessarily a reason to start performance management, or to take them down, disciplinary routes, or even think, actually, do we really need their role anymore? Because, as you say, it's the individual, it's the environment that they're in, and they might actually do better in the office than they do working from home. So I think as an employer, you need to be really flexible in your approach, and also objective, and just understand what's actually unfolded in front of you.
Yeah, and to have conversations about it. It's about collaborating, isn't it, with your employees to find a way to help them be productive, and talk about how you're going to measure that and report it and so on.
Yeah, I think probably, you know, throughout the questions around remote working, I think one of the key bits that I think we will keep coming back to, as we've discussed, is that real collaboration is key.